Hey everyone, welcome back to PSLE Math for you. It's Viewer again, and today we are gonna go through year 2022, paper 2, question 17, and the topic is on ratios. Now, if you have a friend who could benefit from this video, please share it with them. It's a free resource for everyone. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe and get new alerts on my new content as well. Okay, but for now, let's go check out what we have today. Alright, let's see what we have here. It's a 3-part question, total of 4 marks. Let's see what Mrs. Lee has for us. It seems like she has 40 cakes, large and small, and the large cake to small cake ratio is 5:3. So every 5 large cakes, she would have 3 small cakes. That's what it means. Now she decorated the cakes with cherries. The number of cherries used for each large cake and small cake was in a ratio of 3:2. So if one large cake has 3 cherries, then the small cake will have 2 cherries, and that's what the ratio means. Okay. She used a total of 204 cherries to decorate all small cakes and also only 7 large cakes. Okay, so let's look at what the first part of the question wants. Now, how many small cakes did Mrs. Lee bake? I'm going to use the first sentence to help me with finding this answer, because it says that Mrs. Lee baked a total of 40 large and small cakes, and the ratio is 5:3. Now, if I visualize this, and I always like to visualize stuff, it just helps me answer the question a bit better. So if I visualize this like that, every 5 big cakes or large cakes, Mrs. Lee has 3 small cakes. So which means that if she has 50 large cakes, right, she would have 30 small cakes, right? Because that's what ratio of 5:3 means, and ratio of 5:3 is normally expressed in the simplest form as well, instead of 50:30, right? And it also really means that, if I have 16 cakes in total, the number of large cakes I have would be 10, and the small cakes I have would be 6, and it will still maintain a 5:3 ratio. Now I'm going to transport that visual into a table, and in this table, large cakes to small cakes is 5:3, but large cake has 5 parts, small cake has 3 parts, and the total number of parts, if you put large cakes and small cakes together, is 5 plus 3, is 8 parts. And we know from the question that, hey, these 8 parts actually represent a total of 40 cakes. So I'm going to make a simple equation here. 8 parts equals to 40 cakes. Now, the important thing about ratios is we have to always try and find out what one part is. Because however the question wants to ask us, it's always a useful understanding to have. And I'll show you why. Because if 48 parts equals to 40 cakes, then one part equals simply to 40 divided by 8. And that's 5 cakes. And so you would be able to find out how many small cakes there are, because small cakes represent 3 parts. And so you take 5 cakes, which is 1 part, multiply by 3. So that's 15 cakes. And similarly, if I ask you how many large cakes there are, you would take 5 cakes, which is 1 part, multiply by 5 parts, which is 5 times 5, 25. Alright, so that's the answer for the first part. Okay, moving on. How many cherries did Mrs. Lee use for all small cakes? And they're only asking about small cakes. So first, I'm going to highlight this sentence. The number of cherries used for each large cake and small cakes was in a ratio of 3:2. Then they say that total of 204 cherries were used. And there were 7 large cakes, and we know from part A of the question that there were 15 small cakes. So with that, I'm going to share with you this visualization, right? Basically, I'm going to reiterate that there are large cakes and small cakes. And if every large cake is decorated with 3 cherries, then the small cakes will be decorated with 2, and that's the ratio of 3:2. And of course, if the large cakes are decorated with 6 cherries, then the small cakes will be decorated with 4 cherries, because that proportion of ratio is maintained, right? So with that information, then I want to go down to how I approach this question. I know that there's 7 large cakes because the question tells us, and 15 small cakes because this is from part A. Now the ratio per cake is 3:2. So I'm talking in terms of 3 parts, 2 parts. And I don't know exactly how many cherries were decorated in each of the large and small cakes. But if I take the total number of cherries or the total number of cakes for each large and small and multiply by the ratio for each. So large cakes, I would therefore take 7, multiply by 3 parts for each cake. I will get 21 parts of cherries, okay? And 15 small cakes, each has 2 parts, and I'll multiply that. So therefore, from the small cakes population, I will get 30 parts of cherries. Now, in total, I have 51 parts. But it doesn't mean 51 cherries, just 51 parts. We don't know how many cherries are in one part. So with this, then we go back to that ratio equation where we need to kind of break down what one part of cherries is. And the question did tell us that the total number of cherries used was 204. And 204 is actually 51 parts. That's what we've calculated here. So then we can find out what one part is, right? Because one part would be equals to 204 divided by 51, which is actually 4 cherries. Now the question has asked us, how many cherries did Mrs. Lee use for all small cakes? And how many parts of cherries did we use for small cakes? All of the small cakes. Refer back to the table here. Right? It's 30 parts. So that's where I've taken 1 part of cherries equals to 4 1 part of cherries equals to 4 cherries, multiplied by 30 parts, which is 4 times 30, it's 120 cherries. Voila! That's part B of your question. Now if this is confusing, please give me your feedback, give me your questions, right? Okay, now let's move on to the next part. Okay, the last part of the question, how many more cherries did Mrs. Lee need for the remaining large cakes? Because in the question, it did say that she only decorated 7 large cakes. So if I were to ask you how many large cakes were not decorated, could you figure that out based on what we've done so far? So basically, I know there are 40 cakes in total, 15 small cakes. So therefore, large cakes, we have about 25, right? And 25, 7 are decorated, and therefore we have 18 that are not decorated. Okay, so that's the 18 large cakes that are not decorated. Now let's see how I approach this question. Okay, so that's the 18 cakes here. And from part B of the question, we said that 1 large cake requires 20 or 7 large cakes required 21 parts of cherries. Okay, and I'm just going to show you this table again. 7 large cakes requires 21 parts of cherries, and 1 part of cherry was 4 cherries. So if I go down here, the total number of cherries that I used for 7 large cakes was actually 4 cherries per part, multiplied by 21 parts for the total of 7 cakes or large cakes, right? And that's going to be 84 cherries. Now therefore, one large cake requires 84 cherries divided by 7, which would give me 12 cherries. And if you need to decorate 18 large cakes with the same amount of cherries per cake, then you just take 12 cherries multiplied by 18 cakes, and then you get 216. Okay, that's the end of that. But before we go, I thought it's always important to recap on the key learnings. And the first key learning is what are ratios? Ratios are, when we compare one value to another. So like large cakes to small cakes is a ratio of 5:3, but it doesn't mean that we only have 5 large cakes and 3 small cakes. It's just the proportion. What is large cakes number compared to small cakes, and they are usually expressed in the simplest form. right? I think I've done quite a bit of examples on, you know, how much does one part represent. I think that's an important thing to ask, whether it's cakes or whether you're dealing with something else in your question. Now, I've also come across this Math is Fun website that was quite interesting. I thought they had quite nice visualizations. It looks quite simple, and I'm just going to share it with you. This is what it looks like. You know, it tells you a bit about what ratios are, and you know, has some pretty simple visualizations too. Okay. Lastly, if you have any, you want to, you know, try out similar questions, here you go. So that's it. Now, if any of this sound a bit confusing to you and you want to reach out for some clarification, please feel free to do that. I'll be more than happy to help. If not, I'll see you again in the next video. Take care for now. Bye bye.